What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Master and Apprentice video and podcast. So, if you guys are any kind of Lego or Lego Star Wars fan, you without a doubt have kind of noticed over the years, especially like from 2020 and forward, even 2015 forward, that Legos just feel really expensive, more than they have normally. Obviously, we have things like inflation and just different economic situations for regions. But, but even with that in mind, it just feels like Lego as like a toy company, especially Lego Star Wars, um, has gotten more expensive. Now I say Lego Star Wars, especially Lego Star Wars is Star Wars is the biggest catalyst for Lego. They make the most sense for them. They make the most profit in general. So that's kind of why we do that, and because we're a Lego Star Wars channel. With all that being said, we're gonna kind of go into it and ask a couple different questions, answer a different couple questions, to try to figure out why is Lego so expensive, more than it feels like it should be sometimes. But to answer these kind of questions, we have to ask one question to set everything else up. And have Legos gotten more expensive? And we're gonna look at this in two manners: factually and subjectively. How we view this as a person, and just do the numbers support our Legos getting more expensive? To start us off with everything else, the answer is yes. Legos have gotten more expensive just because of the fact of inflation, and Lego knows this and has done this. Lego knows people make more money, money is worth less, so they kind of raise the prices slowly over the years. But we're not looking at that because that's a given. We're looking at is it worth what you're paying? Are you getting the worth versus cost, right? So we're gonna look at a couple different sets. A lot of the examples we have is from 2015 and forward. And the reason that I chose 2015 is where we saw a big jump in the Lego Star Wars catalog from a couple of sets to a lot of sets. And we're looking at what was 30 or 20 sets a year to 40, 50, 60 sets a year, right? And that started in 2015. And so a lot of common era sets are in 2015, not to mention the example of Disney was starting to make more Star Wars content around this time. So there was just a lot more stuff on the shelves for toys in general at this time, right? A lot more of this IP was out there on shelves in general. So we have more to compare to. So that's why we're using 2015. Now, I think if we're being completely honest with ourselves, we can agree that the value of which we're getting in return for what we pay is not always fair, even outside things like inflation. Take the Lego Star Wars 2020 release of set 75286 General Grievous Starfighter for $80 at retail. As a fan, when you look at this set, it just doesn't seem fair. The price per piece is just off. The minifigures that you get, I mean, they're pretty good, but for $80, even today, right, in 2024, this just seems like an outrageous price. And this was in 2020, keep in mind. So this was 4 years ago, almost half a decade ago. And this felt unfair today. Imagine what it would be like in 2020, right? Something in 2022. So just 2 years later, we got the set 75323, the Bad Batch Cad Bane Justifier for $170. Now this set was great, and it was an actually really good set. The minifigures were pretty great, but for again $170, the minifigures you get, not just the quantity but the quality and the size of the actual build, the price per piece just didn't seem worth $170 at the time. And again, this was 2 years ago. So if you add that today in 2024, how much worse would it feel like, right, than it was in 2022? So subjectively, if you look at those two sets 2 or 3 years apart, they just don't seem like they're worth it. Now I'm going to compare two sets that are only a couple years apart, but you can see just a massive jump in pretty much only thing is price. Pieces are very similar. The minifigures quality and quantity are very similar, and the actual build itself in both of these are very similar. And I'm going to be talking about the 2021 75316, the Mandalorian Starfighter, a set with 544 pieces and retailed for $60. It had 3 minifigures. And this was a Clone Wars set. It had kind of come off of the Clone Wars Season 7 arc, and it was a pretty beloved set. This came out 2021. Not but 2 years later, in 2023, we had the set 75362 Ahsoka Tano's T6 Jedi Shuttle. This had 599 pieces, so about 50 pieces more, but it retailed for $80. And this had 4 minifigures. After having built both, I can say from my perspective, these are very similar sets, right? If you compare them just to size, they're similar. You compare them to style, they're similar. I mean, the biggest difference is the colors, and that's it. Um, so if you look at those, you're telling me that I'm supposed to believe that in 2 years, inflation increased that set to $20? I just don't believe that. I think we can look at that and we can agree that $20 in an upcharge isn't fair. Just in 2 years, right? If that was in like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, we'd understand it. But in 2 years, the economy hasn't shifted that much that you're telling me 50 pieces is worth an extra $20. It's just not. I don't think anyone can believe that. Maybe $10. I would say it's still too much, but we can maybe agree on that somewhere. But you see what I mean? Subjectively, we can look at some sets and say, okay, this doesn't really seem what it's worth. But factually, if we look at some of these sets and we compare them to predecessors that are similar, or even just actual remakes, the upscale and charge is very blatant. On this next slide, I'm going to be showing you guys a chart that I made up of all the numbers and information I could find. So we got a chart on the top line. It's representing the year. On the left, which is represented by the purple, the deeper you go, the more expensive it gets, right? So we can see in 2015, it costed under $2,400 for all of the sets that year. And then on the right, we have what the average cost of what each set would be if you averaged it all out for the total cost and the total amount of sets, right? So that's what the orange blocks are. I guess the main thing is to look at orange is the average, the purple is the total, and the deeper you go down, the more expensive it got, essentially, right? So starting from the right, we can see that you were actually getting a fair amount of what you were paying for. There's a lot of sets, about 64 sets that year. You weren't having to pay too much. We would see it was under $2,500 in total that year for all the sets if you bought them. And not to mention, if you look at it, it cost about $36 if you wanted to buy a set. If you average it all out, that was about the average cost. That is phenomenal, right? If you, I think if we can agree, if that was today's market, Lego would be skyrocketing through. Right? That'd be awesome. But we can see 2016, 2017, they boosted the amount, but the average cost was still relatively fair at that time. Now, it's easy to explain why they had a lot more sets that was worth more, and that's because it was 2016 was kind of like one of the first years after Force Awakens came out, so it was like the new era of Lego Star Wars, right? Star Wars Force Awakens Episode 7 came out in 2015, but they kind of make a lot of the sets revolving around those movies and shows the year after. And so we got a lot of the sets coming out in 2016, not to mention we had Rogue One sets. So it was a big year. They had a lot of sets. Not to mention 2015 to 2018 was when they made the most amount of sets in like the last decade. So with all that being said, yes, in totality, it costed more, but you were still getting a fair average. It's about $43 to $45 from 2016 to 2019 if you wanted to buy a set, right? And then 2020, we see a huge change. 2020 was not only a big drop off in the amount of sets that were produced, going from about 60 sets to even 70 at one point to 40. So about 20 sets were dropped off. Well, yes, they costed less in totality. That's because there wasn't as many sets. So that makes sense. But we can see the average does not meet up with the total cost. So sets were starting to kind of get more expensive around 2020. Now, this makes a lot of sense. If you haven't been living underneath a rock, the COVID pandemic hit and it just messed up the whole economic system around the world for each country. It was different region by region, but overall, it messed up a lot of things economically. So this makes sense for 2020, why we saw this kind of weird chart. I mean, the average set costed $45, but if you bought every set that year, it was less than $2,200, right? And there's only like 40 something sets that year. 2021, they started to bounce back. They made more sets, but they started to cost a lot more, kind of getting up past 2,500. But they shot down the average cost, going to about $60 a set. So only 5 years prior, what was about $35 a set, shot up to 62. So almost doubled, which is crazy. But again, they're kind of bouncing back from 2021. But 2022 is the same story. The average is a little bit better, but it's still not great. And then 2023 is the worst of all of the above. I mean, I guess the only thing is we got more sets than we did in 2020 and 2021, but the total cost went way high and the total average of each set stayed high. So again, we just kind of hit rock bottom in 2020 and it just kind of kept getting worse and worse from there. And we could see the trajectory in 2015, like the average was kind of going up a couple bucks and that would fluctuate every other year. But then after 2020, we just hit rock bottom. Now, you can make an excuse for 2020 and 2021 even. But 2022, 2023, 2024, you can already see the writing on the wall. Lego just really never went back to those prices that they had. And you can argue, the economic situation is never going to be the same. It's never going to be similar. So you can't compare it to those previous numbers. In some sense, you can. If you look at the price per piece, a lot of people base the price for the piece, right? People try to average out whatever you're paying for about 10 cents a piece. So if you're getting a 700 piece set, it should be about $70, right? The problem with that is Lego knows that, and they fluctuate the pieces they're using to be using smaller pieces in total. So they can use more pieces, give you the same size build, and you pay more for it, right? And that's how they get you. They're not really changing what they're doing. They're just you're just paying more for it, essentially. That's all it's changing. And that's kind of what we've been seeing today. I mean, if you look at something that's, a good example is the New Republic Coruscant gunship. This was a pretty exciting set when we heard it was rumored to come out. The gunship is a Clone Wars favorite. A lot of Lego Star Wars fans are Clone Wars fans because a lot of that age group kind of fall in the same bracket. So we were excited to get it back, and it was a new gunship. It was red. It was Coruscant Guard. But then we heard it was only $140. And when I heard that, just like everyone else, I was excited because I was expecting $160 to $170 because the gunships in years prior had been about $120 to $140. So you would think after 10 years of not putting out a full-size gunship that they would have raised that price due to inflation. But they didn't. They kept it at that price. And so we were all very interested to see how this turned out. Is this going to be the best set in the last 2020 era? No, they downsized it. And while you did pay the same amount you would have paid for a gunship 10 years prior, you got for lack of better words, a crappier product, right? The ship in total was smaller. The play functions and accessibilities were smaller and less of them. And because of that, it just didn't pan out to be as nice as the gunships from years prior, even though it was the same price. Another really good example, I think, is something like the 2023 Set 75347 TIE Bomber, retailing for $65 for about 625 pieces or something like that. So the price per piece was there and it was right. But when building it, you can see a lot of the times they use what could have been just one bigger piece. They use a couple of smaller pieces. And you can kind of notice the tactic in that where they're trying to raise the piece count to match the price count. And on top of that, they also added a couple of extra random builds. Now, it's nice when LEGO gives you a couple extra projectiles for the projectile launchers, but it's really never needed when they give you a carrier, a built-in carrier, like a carrier transport. They did that, not to mention they had a Gong Droid. So that's probably an extra 100 pieces altogether and all those extra things that would have maybe made the set 550 pieces, which is probably what that set should have costed, about $55. Because when you hold that, it doesn't feel like $65. And a lot of these times, when they go to Amazon or even Lego, they will actually go on sale and kind of be put on sale for what they should be costing, right? If you go and find the TIE Bomber anywhere, you can usually find it for about $55, whether it be on Amazon, eBay, or any other secondary market. You can usually find it for what it's worth a lot of the times, right? We see this a lot in the 4+ sets. I mean, these are notorious for being awful with the price per piece, but they're not really meant for the older crowd. They're meant for grandparents who buy it for their, 4+ grandkids, right? But if you go to the secondary market, you usually find them for $20, $30 off and kind of be on sale for what the right price should be. And I think that's the best way to look at it. If you can find a Lego set that came out today, right? Come out a couple months ago, January 2024 or May of 2024, right? Or even let's say, March of 2024. And you go to the secondary market, you will find a pretty accurate price of what that set should cost. And that's kind of my whole point of this video is, we all expect Lego to be expensive. It's one of the premier toys in the toy market, right? And not to mention a premier toy teaming up with a premier IP company in Star Wars and Lucasfilm. We don't expect this to be a cheap product. We also don't expect it to be an over expensive product because this was aimed at a younger crowd to begin with for kids, right? A lot of these say under 18 plus. A lot of them say 16, 14, 12, or even 4+. So that overpricing just seems a little unfair sometimes for things like I said, like the TIE Bomber, right? Or Cad Bane's Justifier. Just a couple examples of sets that I think a lot of fans like these sets. They like the designs, like the minifigures, but it just seems too pricey. And if I can go to a secondary market while it's still on shelves, brand new in stores, and people are selling it for cheaper and an average cheaper, right? We know that's probably not what it's worth. That's not what fans are willing to pay. Its worth isn't what's assigned a number. The worth is what people are willing to pay, right? And I think it kind of shows in the Lego market today. It's very weird. A lot of times, unless I buy it for review for the channel, I won't buy a set brand new. I'll wait to see what it does on the secondary market on eBay or even Facebook Marketplace sometimes, or Bricklink, just other secondary markets for Lego Star Wars, and I'll see what people are willing to pay for it. I didn't buy Cad Bane's Justifier brand new. I think I bought that for about $135 on eBay twice. Brand new, sealed in the box, not a scratch on it, because that's what people are willing to pay an average, right? And that's not mentioning sometimes you just find a really good deal. I think I bought one brand new for Lego because they had a big promotion, right? It was a promotion. It just kind of, I know it's a weird subject because everyone's economic situation is different, especially if you don't live in America or you live in Europe or Asia or wherever region you are from. It's different for each region. But I think overall we can agree Lego Star Wars as a whole has gotten more expensive. And not just because of inflation or because of economic situations in different regions, but because of the COVID situation in 2020, but because of what fans are willing to pay, right? And because of that, sometimes Lego gets mixed messages, right? If you haven't noticed, Bad Batch, a hit series, just wrapped up season 3, the finale, the last season, has only had 2 Lego sets. Shows that were similar before, like Clone Wars and Rebels, very same style, same age, all of it, had many more sets, right? Because fans were willing to pay that price. Fans were not willing to pay that price for that $107 Cad Bane set, which was probably worth $150 at the most, right? And it just kind of shows, and I think sometimes Lego gets mixed messages because of it, right? The Cad Bane Justifier was an awesome set. I loved it. But it wasn't worth $170 to me or to pretty much any other Lego Star Wars fan. That's kind of the thing with these sets being overpriced. I think Lego is only hurting themselves by doing this because they get mixed messages and sets that would sell fine if the price was just a little bit lower, right? Or in some cases, like the Republic Gunship, if they were a bit higher and you gave us the right amount of pieces to make this set more accurate, more playable, more displayable even, they would do better, right? So that price per piece can sometimes be misgiving, I think. So there you guys go. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. You guys agree, disagree with everything I've stated. It's just kind of a weird video to make because again, it's different in everybody's situation, but overall, it's kind of obvious Lego Star Wars has gotten more expensive over the years. It's gotten more popular. So with that, we expected it to get more expensive. There's inflation that affects it, obviously. We had a global pandemic. I mean, how often does that happen? Am I right? So obviously that affected everything. But even with that, sometimes it still just doesn't feel right when you see these prices matched up with some of these sets. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you guys agree, disagree, if you guys have any other ideas. I try to do a good amount of research to give you guys a fair picture of the average set cost and all that. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you guys like the video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. We appreciate it. If you guys are on podcast, don't forget to hit that follow and download. It helps out the podcast a whole lot. And yeah, with that, we will see you guys in the next video. See ya.